Marvel Rivals has been out almost 2 whole years, and we've gotten countless characters from Daredevil to Angela to Black Cat to White Fox to Gambit to Rogue. But one thing that is sorely missing in Marvel Rivals is villains. Now, you can say, we've got villains. What do we have in the game? 5 villains? Magneto, Hela, Ultron, Loki, Venom. On an ever-growing roster in a game called Marvel Rivals, you would think we would have more villains. So today, we are doing just that. We're coming up with a list of villains that I would like to see added to Marvel Rivals. Now, as a Spider-Man player, my job is pretty much to annoy almost every support on the battlefield. But Spider-Man doesn't exactly have a rival in this game. Sure, you got Venom, but why not Green Goblin? Green Goblin in Marvel Rivals, I feel like, would be our first flying tank other than Angela, like a real flyer, someone such as like an Iron Man. I think he could go either way, a tank or a DPS. Preferably, I think a tank would go way harder for Green Goblin. Just imagine being a support getting carpet bombed by pumpkin bombs by Green Goblin. In my mind, he would play a lot like a Iron Man with a bigger health pool on a glider, so maybe his flying would be different. Have those pumpkin bombs, his little zap that he does out of his finger maybe could be one of his abilities. His glider could have a dash or something along those lines. But sticking in the wheelhouse of Spider-Man villains, who wouldn't want to see the Sandman? We've got characters like Groot and Emma who could put up barriers, block off sections of the map, but we don't have a super versatile tank that could really control the battlefield. Groot can put up walls, sure, and Emma could put up her walls, but having a character like Sandman who could adapt to quite literally any situation would be a sick addition to the roster. Just imagine your team is getting overrun, you don't got a Groot, but you got a Sandman who drops a sand pit in the middle of point and sinks half the other team in it, gives them a slow effect, or puts up a wall that could block off potential poke players, buffs the team's defense, giving them a little status buff, kind of like how Mantis can give you a speed boost or a damage boost. Also, with that comes increased mobility. I feel like Sandman would be a pretty mobile tank for the most part, maybe traveling through little sand pits or having a Luna-like trail of sand rather than ice. I know we are kind of staying in that Spider-Man niche, but me being a massive Spider-Man fan makes me want to see these villains in the game. And one of my favorites has always been Electro. Electro, obviously, I have a feeling he would be a DPS predominantly, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't be a healer. I also think that there could be a playstyle for him to be a healer, but in my mind, Electro would be a DPS with capabilities of bouncing between targets with his electricity, such as kind of like a Cyclops bounce or how Gambit's cards bounce between players. Rather than it being heals, it could be a damage burst of lightning that could have fall off damage after it hits every target. So the first target would get hit with the most, and then every subsequent target would get hit with a little bit less. He would definitely have to be a flying character or have the ability to be in the air for a prolonged period of time. Maybe flying kind of like Johnny, or he could have dashes rather than fly to keep him in the air. But having him as a flyer would fit pretty well for his playstyle, kind of poking from up above. Much like a Johnny, I feel like his damage could be kind of a mid to close range, so the closer you are, it's a burst of electricity that could zap your health, maybe slow you. But speaking of slow, or more rather the opposite of slow, why not the big behemoth himself, Juggernaut? Having Juggernaut in the game would change the entire dynamic of tanking. Over the last few seasons, tanking has been kind of one of those things that the community has kind of pushed to the wayside. Not a lot of tank players out there. So why not add a fun character in the game who would play much like Thing, I would think, with a constant dash as one of his primary abilities, where you wouldn't be able to get CC'd, but you could disturb the other team's backline or front line or what have you. And potentially the longer that you would dash, the stronger that your dash would get, so the more damage it would get the longer that you do it. But the risk that you run of running into their backline would be getting stuck back there and then their whole team turning and pretty much deleting you. But that's where the fun comes in of being Juggernaut. You could dash in, do some damage much like the Thing, and then dash out. I feel like he would add a whole nother layer to tanking in the game. Finally stepping out of the Spider-Man realm and that kind of corner Marvel universe, I feel like we should dip a little bit into the Captain America universe and get Baron Zemo. Adding Zemo to the game would add a different playstyle that we haven't seen in a long time. The last character that has been added to the game with a similar playstyle, I feel like, would be Blade, with a highly sword-driven playstyle, since Zemo is extremely proficient with swords and hand-to-hand combat. But not only that, I feel like he would do well with having a pistol or some sort of gun as his secondary, so you could switch between fighting styles, kind of poke when you're further away, and then when you want to flank and or dive, you change to your sword form. And since Zemo has Compound X, I feel like having one of his abilities or passives being a regenerative healing, somewhat akin to something like a Wolverine, obviously like not as much, but something similar, would be a super sick addition to his kit. And maybe a reflect, playing with his sword form if you're up close, so maybe being able to reflect things like Daredevil does or Blade does would be a super cool addition. And up next we have the first addition to the strategist section of this video. This next one, he's a super underrated character, and I feel like I don't see a lot of them in Marvel media anymore, or at least maybe I'm not paying attention hard enough. He had kind of like a cameo in Age of Ultron. But this next character is Klaw. I believe he's mostly a Black Panther villain. The sound-based villain. He is one of those supervillains that kind of goes under the radar, but I feel like his power set is so sweet. And sound-based characters are so cool. So I feel like he'd be a cool strategist. Like Sue's kind of got like her force field stuff, and I feel like he would play similarly to that, but having sound-based attacks that could be like sound waves or what have you that pass through your team and go into the enemy team, so it can heal on the way, and then once it gets to the enemy team it can damage them. I feel like he would also have abilities that would debuff enemies, like debuff their ability to output as much damage or debuff their movement, maybe slowing them down with his sound vibration or what have you. Somewhat akin to, I feel like he would play somewhere in between a Invis and maybe a Mantis with his debuff abilities and potentially the ability to buff your teammates or their movement or damage. And finally, for the last but not least character, we have Enchantress, which we already have a Thor villain. We actually have two, Hela and Loki, but I feel like Enchantress would be a cool addition. A little similar to Loki in the fact that she can shapeshift and take other people's forms, but she also has other magical abilities like teleporting and stuff like that. I feel like it wouldn't be too far of a stretch to give her the ability to hex other opponents, possibly like give them an effect that they can't use a certain ability for the next 10 or so seconds, or slow them down with a hex, as well as during her hexes potentially the person that is hexed could be more susceptible to damage, like could take more damage from that team or couldn't output as much damage. But that will be all. That will be my list for villains that I want to see come to Marvel Rivals. I absolutely love this game, and as the roster grows, I want to see more villains added. Hopefully Doom or Apocalypse or Thanos one day, potentially. Maybe I'll do a video talking about more villains if you guys would like it. But that's going to be all. If you guys like the video, subscribe, like, comment down below to let me know what you guys want to see next. Peace.